The challenge begins. The arena was massive. Bright lights shone down on the battlefield, making the polished metal floor gleam. Thousands of aliens filled the stadium, their voices mixing into a deafening roar. Some had scales, some had fur, and some had glowing eyes, but all of them had come for one reason: to witness the fight. In the center of the arena stood the champion. He was a Xarlock warrior, towering over any human. His body was covered in thick, gray armor-like skin. His claws were long and sharp, his eyes burning with confidence. For 200 years, no one had beaten him in combat. Many had tried. All had failed. He raised his arms and let out a thunderous roar. The crowd erupted in cheers. "No human has ever beaten me," his voice echoed across the arena. "And today will be no different." The spectators laughed. They all believed it. Humans were weak. Humans used technology, weapons, and tricks. But here, in pure combat, humans stood no chance. Then the gates on the opposite side of the arena opened with a hiss. A single figure stepped out, Captain Alex Carter. He was smaller than the Xarlock by at least 2 feet. He wore no armor, only a simple combat uniform. His short brown hair was slightly messy, and his face showed no fear. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then, a wave of laughter spread across the stadium. "This is the challenger?" A 3-eyed alien scoffed. "He will last 10 seconds." Another laughed. The Xarlock champion grinned, stepping forward. His heavy footsteps echoed across the arena. "Human," he said, his deep voice dripping with amusement. "Do you understand what is about to happen?" Alex met his gaze, calm and unshaken. "Yes," he said simply. The alien warrior's grin widened. He spread his arms, showing off his powerful body. "You are fragile, weak. You rely on machines to fight your battles. But here, there is no armor, no guns, no tricks, just strength and skill." The crowd cheered again. They had seen this before. A human would come, full of confidence, only to be crushed in seconds. But Alex didn't react. He simply rolled his shoulders and stretched his neck. "You talk too much," he said. The Xarlock's grin faltered. A murmur ran through the crowd. This human wasn't afraid. The announcer, a floating drone with a metallic voice, hovered above them. "The rules are simple," it declared. "The fight continues until one fighter cannot stand. No weapons, no assistance, only combat." The Xarlock cracked his knuckles, excitement gleaming in his eyes. "I will enjoy this." Alex took a deep breath. He was ready. A loud gong echoed across the arena. The fight had begun. The Xarlock charged forward, faster than anyone expected. His massive fist swung at Alex's head like a hammer. But Alex wasn't there. At the last moment, he stepped aside, barely dodging the strike. The Xarlock's fist slammed into the ground, making the floor tremble. The crowd gasped. Alex didn't hesitate. He countered. A quick jab, right to the Xarlock's ribs. The alien barely flinched. He grinned. That tickled. Without warning, the Xarlock spun around, swinging his massive arm. Alex tried to move, but the alien was fast. Too fast. The blow caught Alex in the side, sending him skidding across the metal floor. The crowd roared in excitement. The announcer's voice boomed. "First hit, champion Xarlock." Alex groaned, pushing himself up. His ribs ached, but he wasn't done. The Xarlock chuckled, walking toward him. "Still want to fight, human?" Alex wiped a small trickle of blood from his lip. Then he smiled. "Yeah," he said, "I'm just getting started." The crowd froze. Nobody smiled after taking the hit from the Xarlock. Nobody stood up so easily. The champion's grin faded. For the first time in 200 years, he felt something strange. A small, nagging feeling. Doubt. First strike. The arena was alive with noise, cheers, laughter, and disbelief. The Karlach warrior had struck first, sending Captain Alex Carter skidding across the floor. It was a familiar sight. Every challenger before him had fallen just as easily. But then, something unexpected happened. Alex got back up. His lip was bleeding. His ribs ached from the impact. But instead of fear, instead of hesitation, he smiled. The crowd fell silent. The Karlach's grin faded slightly. This was not normal. By now, a human should be gasping for air, struggling to stand. But Alex was already back on his feet, wiping the blood from his chin like it was nothing. The announcer's mechanical voice broke the silence. First hit, champion Karlach. Fight continues. The Karlach warrior tilted his head, examining Alex. Strange, he muttered. You don't seem afraid. Alex shrugged. Should I be? The crowd burst into laughter. No one had ever talked back to the champion in the middle of a fight. The Karlach's grin returned, but there was a flicker of something else in his expression now. Curiosity. Let's test you then. Without warning, he charged again. Alex's eyes sharpened. He had expected this. The Karlach's movements were lightning fast for his size. His fists swung with enough force to break bones. But this time, Alex was ready. The first punch came like a hammer. Alex ducked. The second came from the side. Alex twisted, dodging by inches. The third was a downward strike, aiming to crush him completely. Alex stepped back, just in time. The air trembled from the sheer power of the missed attacks. The crowd's laughter stopped. This wasn't luck. The Karlach warrior narrowed his eyes. You're faster than I expected. Alex smirked. And you're slower than I expected. The Karlach growled. His pride was starting to crack. He lunged forward, claws extended. Alex saw the attack coming. And this time, he didn't dodge. Instead, he moved in. The Karlach expected his enemy to run, to avoid the strike. But Alex didn't. He closed the distance in the blink of an eye. Then, he struck. A clean, precise uppercut, right to the Karlach's jaw. The impact echoed through the arena. The champion's head snapped back. His entire body stumbled. For the first time in history, the crowd gasped. The Karlach shook his head, blinking in confusion. No human had ever done that before. Alex didn't wait. He followed up with a second punch, hitting the Karlach square in the ribs. The alien warrior grunted, stepping back again. The silence in the arena was deafening. The announcer hesitated before speaking. First hit, Captain Alex Carter. A ripple of shock spread through the audience. The Karlach warrior clenched his jaw. He touched his ribs, then his chin, as if confirming what had just happened. He stared at Alex, his expression unreadable. Then, he laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound, full of amusement. You are interesting, he admitted. No human has ever made me stumble before. Alex rolled his shoulders, still grinning. Then today is full of surprises. The Karlach's eyes gleamed with something new. Excitement. I underestimated you, he said. That won't happen again. He lowered his stance, his muscles tensed. This time, he wasn't just playing around. Alex exhaled, shaking out his arms. He could feel it. The real fight was about to begin. The warrior's fury. The arena had never been this silent before. For 200 years, the Karlach warrior had never stumbled, never faltered, never been hit like that. And yet, in front of thousands of spectators, a human had just made him take a step back. The shock in the crowd was almost tangible. Many spectators leaned forward in their seats, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. The Karlach champion was an unstoppable force, until today. But the silence did not last long. A low, rumbling sound filled the air. The Karlach was laughing. It wasn't a laugh of mockery. It wasn't a laugh of arrogance. It was something else, something dangerous. Alex Carter stood still, watching the alien warrior carefully. He could feel it in the air, The mood had shifted. The Xarlock had been playing before, testing him, measuring his speed. But now the real fight was about to begin. The Xarlock lifted his massive head, his glowing yellow eyes locking onto Alex. "You are different," he said, his deep voice calm but full of energy. "No human has ever done what you just did." Alex didn't reply. He didn't let his guard down. The Xarlock rolled his shoulders, then cracked his neck. The amusement faded from his expression, replaced by something colder. "Enough games," he said. Then he moved. Faster than before. Much faster. Alex barely had time to react before the Xarlock was in front of him. A massive fist swung toward his head, moving like a blur. Alex dodged, but not fast enough. The Xarlock's fist grazed his shoulder, and even that tiny impact sent a jolt of pain through Alex's body. Too strong. The crowd roared as the Xarlock pressed forward, swinging again and again, each blow carrying the power to break bones. Alex dodged. Barely. He was moving at his limit. The Xarlock's attacks were faster now. His footwork was sharper, his strikes more precise. Alex felt the shift immediately. Before, the Xarlock had been relying on brute force. Now he was fighting with skill. The champion wasn't just a beast. He was a warrior. Alex exhaled sharply, keeping his movements clean. His eyes stayed locked on his opponent's form, searching for patterns, openings, weaknesses. The Xarlock feinted a punch. Alex moved to dodge, but it was a trap. The alien's other arm swung up, catching Alex straight in the chest. The impact was like being hit by a speeding car. Alex's body flew backward, skidding across the arena floor. The crowd exploded in cheers. The announcer's voice rang out. "Direct hit, champion Xarlock." Alex coughed, his ribs screaming in protest. His vision blurred for a second. The Xarlock was already walking toward him, his heavy footsteps echoing through the battlefield. Alex forced himself to move. He couldn't stay down. He pressed a hand to the ground and pushed himself up, slowly, painfully. The crowd's excitement dimmed as they saw him rise. He was hurt, but he wasn't done. The Xarlock stopped a few feet away, watching. His arms were crossed now, his expression unreadable. "You're still standing?" the warrior asked, tilting his head. Alex wiped his mouth, smearing a bit of blood across his sleeve. "I've had worse." The Xarlock let out a breath. "You are stubborn. I respect that." The crowd murmured. Respect. No human had ever earned that from the champion. But the warrior wasn't finished speaking. That being said, the Xarlock continued, his eyes darkening. "Respect will not save you." Then he vanished. Alex's instincts screamed. The Xarlock had moved. But where? Alex twisted, trying to locate him. Too late. A crushing blow slammed into his side, sending him soaring through the air again. Faster, stronger, more precise. Alex crashed against the metal floor, rolling several times before coming to a stop. The pain was worse this time. His breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. The Xarlock approached again, but now his steps were silent. No arrogance, no boasting, only focus. Alex groaned, pushing himself up onto one knee. His vision swam. His whole body ached. The Xarlock stopped in front of him. He loomed over Alex, his expression hard. "Stay down," the warrior said. "You fought well. You have nothing to prove." Alex's breath steadied. Slowly, he lifted his head, locking eyes with the alien. Then he smiled. The Xarlock frowned. "Why are you smiling?" Alex planted a hand on the floor and forced himself back onto his feet. His ribs protested, but he ignored the pain. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Alex exhaled and rolled his shoulders. His stance was weaker than before, but his eyes burned with determination. He met the Xarlock's gaze and spoke, his voice steady despite the pain. Because, Alex said, I figured you out. The Tarlok's eyes narrowed. Alex shifted his stance, getting ready. His plan was set. The next round was about to begin. The human's secret. The arena was silent. Not a single voice. Not a single cheer. The spectators, who had spent the last hour laughing at the idea of a human challenging the Tarlok champion, now sat frozen in their seats. Because the impossible was happening. Captain Alex Carter was still standing. His ribs ached. His arms felt heavy. His breath came in slow, controlled bursts. He had taken a beating, but he was still in the fight. Across from him, the Tarlok warrior studied him closely. No arrogance, no mockery, just calculation. You figured me out. The champion repeated, his voice deep and measured. Alex wiped the sweat from his forehead, nodding. Yeah. The crowd murmured. What was he talking about? The Tarlok warrior's yellow eyes glowed. He cracked his knuckles. Then prove it. Alex smiled. And then, the human attacked first. The crowd gasped. Alex launched himself forward, moving with surprising speed. The Tarlok reacted instantly, swinging his massive fist. It was an attack that should have crushed Alex. But it missed. Alex dodged, effortlessly. He sidestepped at the last moment, avoiding the attack by inches. The Tarlok's eyes widened. Alex moved again. The alien swung again. And again. He missed. It was the first time in 200 years that an opponent had consistently avoided every strike. The Tarlok's movements became sharper, faster, angrier. He lunged with a knee strike. Alex ducked. A clawed hand slashed toward him. Alex leaned back, just out of reach. A heavy fist came crashing down. Alex twisted, letting it pass him harmlessly. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The Tarlok's strength was useless if it couldn't land a hit. The alien warrior snarled, frustration creeping into his movements. What trick is this? He demanded, stepping back. Alex grinned. No trick, just training. The champion hesitated. Training. Alex circled him now, his confidence returning. You've always been the strongest, haven't you? He said. Always the biggest, always the fastest, always the best. The Tarlok frowned. Where was this going? Alex continued. That means you've never had to struggle, never had to learn, never had to work for it. The crowd was dead silent. Your power made you lazy, Alex said. You rely on instinct. You're used to enemies who are slower, weaker, afraid. But me. He rolled his shoulders, preparing himself. I trained for this. The Tarlok's jaw clenched. He had never faced someone like this before. Someone who studied him. Someone who adapted. Someone who wasn't afraid. For the first time, the Tarlok warrior felt doubt. Alex moved. Before the champion could react, Alex was already inside his guard. A brutal punch to the ribs. The impact shook the arena. The Tarlok grunted, stepping back. The punch had been too precise, too well placed. Alex wasn't just attacking randomly. He had studied the Tarlok's movements. He knew where to strike. The Tarlok growled, furious now. He lunged forward, swinging with everything he had. Alex moved first. He ducked, then countered, a crushing elbow strike to the Tarlok's temple. The alien stumbled. The crowd erupted. It had happened again. A human, a mere human, had forced the unbeatable champion to stumble. Alex stood tall, breathing hard, watching the warrior carefully. The tides had shifted, and everyone in the arena knew it. The Tarlok clenched his fists. His body ached, his pride burned, but more than anything, he was excited. He had never been pushed to his limits. Until today. He grinned. This, he said, rolling his shoulders, is going to be fun. Alex smirked. Yeah, for me. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, It was even. The turning point. The arena felt different now. Before, it had been a place of certainty. The Karlach warrior was the champion. He always won. His strength was unmatched. His victories were inevitable. But now, the impossible was happening. Captain Alex Carter, a human, stood unshaken. The once cheering crowd was now silent. Their laughter had faded. Their excitement had shifted into something else. Doubt. Because for the first time in 200 years, the champion was struggling. The Exarloch's breath came harder. His ribs ached from the precise human strikes. His temple throbbed from that last brutal counter. His confidence hadn't vanished, but it had changed. Before, he had been certain of victory. Now, he was uncertain how this fight would end. Alex Carter had turned the tide. And he knew it. The warrior's rage. The Karlach exhaled slowly, controlling his emotions. He had fought thousands of warriors. He had beaten humans, aliens, cyborgs, and creatures from the deepest voids of space. But this fight was different. Alex wasn't the strongest opponent he had faced. He wasn't the fastest, but he was the smartest. He had been learning, adapting, studying every movement, and that made him dangerous. The Exarloch stomped forward, shaking the ground beneath him. His glowing yellow eyes locked onto Alex, scanning him. Alex didn't move. He just waited, calm, calculated. The Exarloch's mind raced. How do you beat an opponent who learns your every move? Then, a realization. Simple. You stop being predictable. A slow grin spread across the champion's face. You're good human, he admitted, but let's see how well you can keep up. The champion changes tactics. The Karlach warrior moved, but not like before. His attacks weren't just powerful anymore. They were unpredictable. A feint left, a real strike from the right, a sudden knee to the chest, followed by an elbow aiming for Alex's skull. Alex reacted, barely. He dodged the knee, but the elbow clipped his shoulder. Pain shot through his arm. The crowd gasped. Alex stumbled for the first time. The Exarloch's grin widened. Got you. Before Alex could recover, the Exarloch pounced. A devastating punch. This one landed. The force sent Alex flying across the arena. His body slammed against the metal floor. The crowd exploded with cheers. The announcer's voice rang out. Direct hit. Champion Exarloch. Alex groaned, rolling onto his hands and knees. His vision blurred for a second. His body screamed in pain. The Exarloch walked toward him, calm and controlled. He had reclaimed dominance. You adapt well, the warrior admitted, but so do I. The human's resolve. Alex took a slow breath. He pressed a hand against his ribs. Bruised, maybe cracked. His body begged him to stay down. But he wouldn't. He couldn't. This wasn't just about winning. It was about proving something. That humans weren't weak. That they could stand among the strongest. That they could win. Alex forced himself up. His legs felt heavy, but he stood tall. The crowd stared in disbelief. He should have been finished. He should have stayed down. But he didn't. He wiped blood from his mouth, rolled his shoulders, and smirked. That all you got? The Karlach's eyes widened. He had just landed a full power strike, one that had ended warriors twice Alex's size. And yet, Alex Carter was still here. The champion's grin faded. For the first time in his entire life, he felt something strange. Not excitement, not respect. Something deeper. Unease. Alex wasn't just a tough opponent. He was a problem. The final exchange begins. That Karlach braced himself. He would end this fight now. Alex tensed. He could barely breathe, but he had one last plan. The arena buzzed with tension. The next move could decide everything. The Exarloch charge. Alex moved to meet him. The crowd held its breath. A final clash was coming, and nobody knew who would win. The final blow. The Xarlok champion charge, the ground trembling beneath his weight. His yellow eyes burned with determination, his massive fists clenched like hammers ready to crush his opponent. Alex Carter, battered and bruised, stood his ground. He could barely feel his ribs. Each breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. His arms were sore, his legs heavy, but his mind clear, focused, ready. This was it, the final moment, the one that would decide everything. And Alex knew he couldn't afford to make a single mistake. The clash. The Xarlok swung first, a brutal right hook, aiming straight for Alex's skull. Alex ducked. The fist missed by inches, tearing through the air with a deafening whoosh. The Xarlok's second attack followed instantly, a vicious backhand swipe. Alex twisted his body, the alien's claws barely grazing his cheek. The crowd gasped. Nobody had ever dodged 2 consecutive full-power attacks from the champion. But Alex wasn't just dodging. He was waiting, watching, calculating. Then he saw it. The opening. The weakness of the strong. Every great warrior had a weakness. For the Xarlok, it was his own strength. He fought with brute force, relying on his overwhelming power to end fights quickly. But now he was swinging wildly. Now he was missing, and every time he missed, he left himself open. Alex inhaled sharply. This was his moment. The Xarlok's latest attack carried too much momentum. His massive frame was off balance, his left side exposed. Alex struck. A lightning-fast punch to the ribs, right where he had hit before. The impact was brutal. The Xarlok grunted in pain, his breath hitching. But Alex wasn't done. He used the momentum of his first strike to spin, bringing up his knee, smashing it into the alien's stomach. The Xarlok stumbled. For the first time ever, he looked truly shaken. The crowd held its breath. But Alex had one last move. He shifted his weight, turned his hips, and launched the final attack. A devastating uppercut. His fist crashed into the Xarlok's jaw. The sound of impact echoed through the arena. The champion's head snapped back. His massive body froze. And then he fell. The Xarlok collapsed onto his back, the ground shaking beneath him. Silence. The crowd didn't cheer. The announcer didn't speak. For the first time in history, the undefeated champion had been knocked down. By a human. The aftermath. Alex staggered backward, his breathing ragged. He could barely stand. His entire body felt like it had been through a war. But he had done it. The announcer's voice finally spoke, stunned and unsure. The champion has fallen. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Disbelief. Shock. Then a single clap. Then another. And then cheers. A wave of noise erupted, shaking the entire arena. Some aliens roared in excitement. Others looked horrified. But all of them understood one thing. A human had defeated the unbeatable. Alex exhaled, rolling his shoulders. His entire body screamed in pain, but he forced himself to stay upright. Then, a deep, rumbling sound. Laughter. Alex turned. The Xarlok warrior was still lying on the ground, but he was laughing. Not in anger, not in humiliation, but in respect. The massive alien slowly pushed himself up, his jaw still aching from Alex's punch. He turned to face the human, studying him carefully. Then he nodded. "You are the first," the Xarlok said, his voice low and proud. Alex smirked, despite the pain. "Yeah," he muttered, "and I won't be the last." The Xarlok's grin widened. He extended a massive hand. Alex hesitated for a second. Then he gripped the alien's forearm, a gesture of warriors, of equals. The crowd went wild. History had just been made. Humans were no longer seen as weak. They were no longer seen as inferior, because today a human had proven himself, and the galaxy would never forget. The legend begins. The arena was forever changed. Before this day, the Xarlock warrior had never been beaten. Before this day, humans had always been the weaker race. Before this day, no one had dared to believe that a mere human could stand against the greatest fighter in the galaxy. But now, the entire galaxy had witnessed the impossible. Captain Alex Carter had done what no one else could. He had defeated the champion, and nothing would ever be the same again. The aftershock. The cheers from the crowd were deafening. Aliens from all corners of the universe, creatures with scales, fur, and metal limbs, roared in excitement. Some cheered because they had witnessed history. Others cheered because they had bet on Alex and just won a fortune. And some watched in horrified silence. The ones who had always seen humans as weak. The ones who had laughed at Earth's species, calling them frail and powerless. Those aliens now stared at Alex Carter in fear. Because if one human could do this, what if there were others? The warrior's farewell. The Xarlock champion stood tall, still rubbing his jaw where Alex had landed the final punch. The towering alien had spent centuries undefeated. He had crushed thousands of warriors, humiliated challengers, and walked away without a single scratch. But today, he bore the marks of battle. And yet, he didn't look angry. He didn't look humiliated. He looked proud. He turned to Alex, his yellow eyes gleaming with respect. "You have earned your place, human," he said, his deep voice carrying across the arena. Alex, exhausted but still standing, gave a small nod. The Xarlock extended his massive arm, not as a challenge, not as an enemy, but as a warrior's handshake. Alex hesitated, then grasped the alien's forearm. A silent agreement, a sign of equals. The crowd erupted into even louder cheers. The announcer's voice trembled with excitement. For the first time in 200 years, the Champion has fallen. The roar of the crowd shook the stadium. The legend of Alex Carter had begun. The interview. Later that night, in a private chamber behind the arena, Alex sat in a chair, holding an ice pack to his ribs. His body felt like it had been hit by a train. Twice. The fight had pushed him to his absolute limit. And yet, as he watched the replay of the match on a holographic screen, he couldn't help but smile. The door slid open. A sleek, robotic drone hovered inside, its camera lens focusing on him. Captain Alex Carter. The AI reporter spoke, its voice smooth and professional. "The entire galaxy is talking about you. You have just done the impossible. How do you feel?" Alex chuckled and adjusted the ice pack. "Like I got run over by a spaceship," he muttered. The AI buzzed in amusement. "You are now considered the greatest human fighter in history. Your victory has changed the way the galaxy views your species. What do you say to those who doubted humanity's strength?" Alex thought for a moment. Then he smirked. "They'll learn soon enough," he said. "This is just the beginning." The challenge spreads. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. On distant planets, in the heart of space stations, and within the darkest corners of alien territories, everyone was talking about one thing. A human had defeated the Xarlock champion. Some alien warlords scoffed. It was a fluke, they muttered. A one-time event. Others weren't so sure. In hidden military bases, alien generals watched replays of the fight, analyzing every move. Could humans be a true threat? Would they rise as warriors? Would they become unstoppable? And in the farthest reaches of space, in a throne room filled with shadows, a new challenger watched. A creature taller than the Xarlock. Stronger, faster, a creature that had never lost a fight. Yet, interesting, the figure murmured. "I wonder how long he'll last against me." The next step. Back in the arena chambers, Alex leaned back in his chair, sighing. The fight was over. But he knew this was only the beginning. His victory had painted a target on his back. Stronger enemies would come. Greater challenges would appear. But as he looked at his reflection in the glass window, he knew one thing for sure. He was ready. Because today, the galaxy had learned a new truth. Humans weren't weak. Humans weren't inferior. Humans could win. And this was just the start.